Action picture fans expect a big finish. And the filmmakers behind Under Siege 2: Dark Territory have no intention of letting them down. Creating such unabashed mayhem requires a staggering amount of preparation and testing. Months of model train construction and set building. Design of a computerized motion control system to power the trains. And studying the physics involved in a head-on collision all precede actual filming. Coming up, we'll meet visual effects supervisor Richard Urasich, who's developed a new application of digital technology to film a fast-moving train on a Hollywood soundstage, and is using some old special effects tricks to place the audience inside the crash. And we'll look at the efforts of earlier filmmakers who found that nothing has quite the impact of a well-staged railroad wreck. It's a tradition of pulling out all the stops and turning a film's finale into a total disaster. Next on Movie Magic. On a ranch in Simi Valley, about an hour's drive from Los Angeles, a crew of 25 has spent the past 6 weeks moving 11,000 cubic yards of earth, pouring nearly 50 tons of concrete, and erecting a 220-foot-long miniature railroad bridge, all in preparation for the climax to the Steven Seagal action picture Under Siege 2: Dark Territory. A passenger train carrying Seagal will collide head-on with a freight train loaded with 800,000 gallons of gasoline.
The idea of finishing big is paramount in our minds. We've so treated the audience over the years to those fun things in the business that I believe that they would really feel shortchanged if you didn't end it that way.
Responsible for creating the big finish is visual effects supervisor Richard Urasich. Mindful of the safety considerations involved in staging a train crash of this magnitude, he has determined it must be filmed in miniature. For the crucial job of building the trains and set in 1/8 scale, Urasich has brought on Robert Wilcox and Tad Shanowski of WKR Productions.
I've worked with them both before. They're great engineers, great artists, and miniature builders. And I might add, it's a wonder we got through it. They did a great job because all this construction occurred during the great rainstorms of the spring of '95.
Matching the look of real trains used in the movie, the WKR team must build 66 locomotives, passenger coaches, and oil tanker cars over a 3-month period. The oil tankers and passenger coaches are made primarily from aluminum, so they will crush upon impact. The freight train engines are molded from the same strong fiberglass used for auto bodies.
They have to take quite a bit of abuse in crash. We don't want them to totally be destroyed because they represent the 30 tons, so they have to show that in a crash.
To cause the trains to derail off the camera side of the bridge, an air cannon is built into each lead locomotive. When the trains collide, an impact switch will trigger the air cannon, which will then shoot out a piece of wood dowel under the locomotive, pushing it up and over the bridge. Another key effect involves the tanker cars.
We had water bladders inside to represent fuel that would be flying out of the tankers when they split apart during the collision. We had a couple tests that we did. We set up some run-up track and we pushed it with a car into a barrier that we made at the other end at the speed that we'd be crashing them at.
Yeah. Is this supposed to collapse at all? Yeah, the weight didn't work here.
Actually, the tankers were quite strong. It's a little bit stronger than I expected. We had to weaken up the frames, and we put a very heavy weight inside that was connected to the skin of the tanker, so it'd pull it in just a little bit, and that's all it took.
Much better.
This is great.
To power the trains, Wilcox has engineered a computerized cable pull system that interlocks both trains and generates up to 35 horsepower.
Bob's expertise in motion control came into play because we had to know that when the trains collided, that we had to know exactly where they were going to collide.
So I wrote a program that was strictly set up for doing that, where you entered in the number of feet you wanted to travel, the number of feet you wanted to accelerate for, and the miles per hour.
Wilcox and Shinosky have already studied a computer model of the crash, showing the anticipated result at 25 miles per hour. Now it's time to perform a physical test.
We put a lead weight on cars on each side to represent the weight of the trains, to see what the action of the engines hitting, what would happen to the coaches and the tanker.
From this test, Wilcox and Shinosky determined that they must structurally weaken the passenger coaches in order for them to sustain greater damage in the crash.
On the very first roll, we're just going to drop the train.
With the shot known affectionately as the Grand Slam just a few days away, Urasich and visual effects producer Laurie Nelson have scheduled 2 more important tests. One entails shooting a train car at various film speeds as it falls from the bridge. A miniature helicopter, operated by radio-controlled pilot Larry Jolly, will also be in this shot.
Okay, let's get going. I don't care about the rain. You're on the train. All right, Larry. Go ahead, Larry. Okay, Mark. All right, cut it. That was very good. That was very good, yeah.
A final test will determine the look of a crucial ingredient to any big action sequence.
Okay.
The explosions.
It's the icing on the cake. You know, there's never a great wreck without some great explosion in the movie. You know, that's the reason we use tanker cars. I mean, what's it going to give us? It's going to give us that incredible explosion.
Pyrotechnician Joe Viscosal has rigged 6 mortar bombs at the base of the bridge to provide fireballs that will be set off as the oil tankers hit the ground.
Roll camera back there. We're rolling.
Ready? Fire in the hole.
Hand out. Good. They're a real nice job, everybody. Thank you. Let's clean it up and go home.
With the testing stage complete, Richard Urasich and his effects team are nearing the home stretch. Rain or shine, they'll be back at it tomorrow, making final preparations for a shot that can have no second take. Coming up, groundbreaking digital effects help keep Under Siege 2 on track.
So what I've done is combine all the background plates together and then did a color correction, and I'll show you what the output looks like.
While the head-on train collision is the most exciting effect shot in Under Siege 2, the film requires several hundred others. For most of these, Richard Urasich is relying on a new digital process he developed especially for the movie. For the past 3 decades, Urasich has been on the leading edge of visual effects innovations. His first feature film job was as an animation cameraman on 2001: A Space Odyssey.
We shot all the Earths and the stars and the moons. It's kind of interesting. We all felt like we went to the class of 2001.
That experience not only hooked Urasich on filmmaking, but was the start of a long association with visual effects pioneer Douglas Trumbull. Together, they created stunning visual effects in such films as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and Blade Runner. After several years of concentrating on IMAX and other special venue movies, Urasich has returned to feature films with Under Siege 2. As always, he welcomes a new challenge.
The first thing to jump off the page was the amount of time that would be spent inside the train, the Grand Continental.
The plan was to film interior scenes on a Hollywood soundstage. To create the illusion that the train is rolling through the Rocky Mountains, Urasich approached Cinesight Digital Film Center, a subsidiary of Eastman Kodak. Within several weeks, Cinesight had developed new computer software that could track camera moves on a blue or green screen. A test was performed at Warner Brothers Studios using a rented bus. First, a handheld shot was filmed with the camera moving from one side of the bus to the other. Next, 4 cameras mounted on a truck filmed overlapping background shots or plates.
Then in the computer, we blended those scenes together, and wherever the camera went in the tracking system, it would use that area of the background.
The test convinced Urasich and the film's producers that the process would work for Under Siege 2. So a specially designed truck, rigged to ride on railroad tracks, was brought to Colorado, where the story takes place. Wide-angle VistaVision cameras mounted to the top of the truck filmed background plates for the movie's interior train scenes. Then, the production moved to the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank. Here, on stage 12, interior scenes were filmed using several train car sets surrounded by green screen. Red tennis balls were attached to the green screen at precise positions. These played a key role in enabling Cinesight digital effects supervisor Brad Kuhn and his team to track the motion of the camera.
Because as the camera moved, the tennis balls would move in relationship with each other. We could take that data and then apply it to the background plates.
For each motion tracking shot, the first step is to digitally paint out the tennis balls. The next step is to apply the background plates. The digital artist can then manipulate the background's color, contrast, and sharpness to achieve the most convincing balance with the interior shot.
The important thing for us is to make sure this exterior action as seen from the inside of the train becomes a secondary action so that it looks as though it was done for real and location.
While he is pushing the envelope in the digital arena, Urasich is also utilizing some old visual effects tricks. One particularly challenging shot in the head-on collision sequence calls for the freight train locomotive, barreling straight toward the camera, to crash through a passenger coach. Urasich's solution calls for an actual locomotive, a full-size set of the passenger car, built by physical effects artist Donald Pennington, and a large mirror. The camera is positioned off to the side and will film the crash via the mirror.
Of course, the locomotive is going to keep going and crash the mirror, and the camera is going to stay out of harm's way.
Okay, here we go.
Whether applying time-honored techniques or cutting-edge technology, Richard Urasich continues to enjoy the challenge of creating visual effects.
I like to work on films and enjoy the films most made by filmmakers that use trickery or visual effects as a story point. You have to be careful to not fall in love with a technique and apply that technique to the film. What you'd have to do is reconfigure the equipment or the tools or all this technology to the script. You don't reconfigure the script to the equipment.
When we return, the Under Siege 2 team holds nothing back for the movie's explosive finale. It didn't take long for pioneering filmmakers to recognize the potential impact of a good train wreck. In his 1898 short film, A Railway Collision, British producer Robert W. Paul staged a head-on collision with model trains that was amazingly convincing for its time. Director-comedian Buster Keaton produced one of the silent era's most memorable scenes when he rolled an actual full-size steam engine onto a collapsible bridge in his 1927 classic, The General. In more recent times, effects pioneer Lee Zavitz shot a full-scale train wreck for the 1964 war drama, The Train. And in 1994, Sony Pictures Imageworks used miniatures to stage an impressive derailment for Speed. In their efforts to create the most exciting railroad disaster to date, The Under Siege 2 filmmakers are employing both full-scale sets to show what's happening inside the crash and miniatures to stage the explosive Grand Slam. And to give the movie extra firepower, they have written an F-117 stealth fighter into the script.
They have targeted Washington to blow it up from outer space, these bad guys that are on this train. Outrageously unlikely plot, of course, but it's fun. And the only way they can stop them is to try and destroy the train, and so they launch a couple of F-117 stealths.
So we built a miniature that was able to carry a payload and explode, and I wanted to explode a miniature over the train. When I suggested that shot, Bob and Tad came up with the idea to put a rocket engine in the back of their miniature and connect it to a few wires and maybe achieve speeds up to 100 miles an hour.
Pyrotechnician Joe Viscosal rigs the 20-pound fiberglass miniature with a rope-like explosive called Primacord, which will literally rip the jet apart. The Primacord will ignite when a pin connected to the F-117 by a length of wire pulls out.
We run a line from its point of startup, and we run that line all the way where Richard thinks it should blow up. So when it gets to a certain spot, it'll yank this wire out and explode the ship.
Just before filming, Viscosal places a 12-ounce gasoline bomb inside the model. This will produce the desired fireball.
Got speed on C. And A&M. Roll. D.
With the F-117 shot complete, the effects crew members can turn their entire attention to the biggest and most expensive shot in the movie, the Grand Slam.
The zoom lens will be mounted here on a set of sticks.
And probably over here.
Urasich and visual effects art director Brent Boats have already rehearsed the crash on a 1/20th scale mock-up of the set. On the actual shoot day, the first order of business is to set up 10 cameras, including 2 embedded in the ground at the base of the bridge. Visual effects supervisor Urasich now turns his attention to camera angles, film speeds, and lighting.
As a supervisor, I try to keep the team together, to project what we might have to do, how we might have to do it. I plan it as a supervisor, but execute it as a cameraman.
As day turns to night, the pyrotechnics crew wires the mortars that will simulate oil tanker explosions.
It's a really tricky thing because you have to look at the cars, and as the cars are hitting down, then you fire them off, and not until then.
The train crew carries out last-minute preparations. Hundreds of miniature luggage pieces are stuffed inside the baggage car. Hopefully, these will spill out during the crash. The air cannons in the lead locomotives are filled with air, and the oil tanker bladders are filled with water. A small explosive device is connected to the front of the Grand Continental to provide sparks on impact. And a fine clayish substance called Fuller's Earth is sprinkled on the cars to simulate the dirt that would naturally come off a train on impact.
Stomach was in knots constantly the last few days, before the Grand Slam, because essentially nothing could go wrong. And you try to cover and think about as many things as you can, pacing back and forth on the train, checking every wheel, checking every joint over and over and over again until, finally the lighting crew had it ready to go.
All right, let's do this. You ready?
The anticipation is so great. I mean, months and months of building. The anticipation to see what these cars are going to do. There's no, how do you plan a train wreck?
Roll cameras, please. Roll cameras. Speed! 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 And send the train.
Beautiful. I love how that car bent
Yeah.
in half up there like that.
Yeah.
It's priceless.
Good work, guys.
Got it.
Let's go look at these videos. Let's check that one out.
Who's buying breakfast? You are, because this day went a lot longer than you said it was going to.
2 days after filming the Grand Slam, Urasich and crew returned to the set, where they staged several additional shots to complete the sequence.
I've been real lucky because I've worked on a number of films in the past and took a break, so that kind of keeps me fresh. It's fun to be around with the crews and just the excitement of getting some things to work that shouldn't work. They can't do that, it won't work. It's kind of fun to do it, to pull it off.
As the Grand Continental and Southern Pacific streak toward their disastrous rendezvous, the audience is about to experience a truly big finish. There are no guaranteed recipes for creating movie magic, but combine an explosive train collision sequence with a talented team of visual effects artists, led by a graduate of the class of 2001, and the result will be a total disaster. Well worth the price of admission.